Have you ever felt like your own thoughts or feelings about money were, I don't know, silently holding you back, even if you couldn't quite put your finger on why?
Yeah, or maybe you're earning okay, you're busy, things seem productive on the surface,
Right.
but that feeling of real lasting wealth, it just feels kind of out of reach.
It's a really common feeling, isn't it? And it often goes deeper than just, say, managing a budget or picking the right stocks.
Absolutely. Very often the root of that financial struggle or maybe just feeling stuck, it lies in these deeper patterns, often unconscious patterns we hold around money itself.
Exactly. And that's precisely what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
We've got a really fascinating stack of sources here provided by one of our listeners, all focused on this powerful, often overlooked world of money mindsets.
You know how our internal world, our thoughts and feelings, profoundly shapes our external financial reality. It's a huge connection.
It really is. So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack the critical insights from some really insightful experts featured in these sources.
Yeah, we want to try and cut through some of the noise and help you, our listener, identify and understand those unconscious beliefs. And some of the strategies are genuinely counterintuitive.
Definitely. And think about the essential shifts needed to move beyond just, making a living.
Right. Towards building genuine abundance and also cultivating maybe a sense of peace around your finances. That's key too.
So important. We're going to explore different facets of this, the psychology that can lead us to self-sabotage.
Which is a big one.
Huge. And the fundamental differences between just earning money and actually building wealth. They're not the same thing at all.
Not at all. And even thinking about money in a different way, maybe as a form of energy that needs to flow correctly.
Yeah, that's a fascinating angle.
Yeah.
And look, these aren't just theoretical ideas floating around.
No, the insights we're drawing from, they come from conversations with people who haven't only achieved, significant external abundance, but they've also done that crucial inner work. They've found powerful inner peace and clarity about their wealth. That combination is rare and powerful.
Okay, let's really dig in then. Let's kick this off with a core idea that, it seems to underpin so much of what we've read here, drawing heavily on insights from Dan Martell.
Okay.
The concept, it sounds simple on the surface, right? But the implications are just profound. Our beliefs are the bedrock of our reality. They heavily influence our behaviors day in, day out. And it's those behaviors that ultimately create our financial results.
So if you're looking at your bank account, your investments, your whole financial picture.
Yeah, and it's not where you want it to be if you're not seeing the abundance you desire.
Then the starting point isn't necessarily just working harder or finding a new strategy.
Exactly. You really have to start by looking inward at your foundational beliefs about money, about wealth, and maybe even about yourself.
And what's striking from these sources is how these limiting beliefs, they're not just sort of one size fits all. They actually fall into distinct categories.
Right, creating very specific kinds of roadblocks.
Yeah, we see two primary areas where negative beliefs tend to hold people back financially.
Okay, so the first type involves limiting beliefs about yourself. These are the internal doubts, the little voices that chip away at your capability or maybe even your worthiness to become financially successful or rich.
And a really key insight here, which I found particularly useful from the material, is listening to the language people use. Or even the language you use, in your own head.
Oh, so?
Well, if you catch yourself using phrases like could or should or maybe it'd be nice when you're thinking about financial goals or picturing a wealthier future, according to the source, that language is actually a pretty big red flag.
Oh, that's interesting. Why those words specifically? What makes them problematic?
Well, the idea is that kind of phrasing often carries this built-in expectation of failure. It's almost baked right into the words. Yeah, it's not like a declaration of intent. It's not a step towards action. It's more of a passive wish, a hypothetical, I could be rich, or money should be easier, or it'd be nice if...
Right, it lacks conviction.
Exactly. Compare that to something like, I am building wealth, or I am learning what I need to learn. The difference in the words might seem subtle, but the underlying energy, the expectation, it's massive.
So saying things like, I can't do this, or I've never done this before, it frames them as reasons not to try, rather than just challenges to figure out.
Precisely. The language itself reveals a subconscious lack of belief, maybe even an anticipation that it just won't happen for you.
Okay, so that's beliefs about yourself. What's the second major category?
The second one involves negative beliefs about the outcome itself, about what it actually means to be rich. This isn't so much about your personal capability, but about your perception of wealth itself and maybe of wealthy people.
Oh, right. And the sources give some pretty common examples of these, don't they? Beliefs like rich people are evil.
Or they don't pay taxes. They must have ripped someone off.
Yeah, or even the idea that rich people are fundamentally unhappy. You hear that one a lot.
And this is where that self-sabotage mechanism really kicks into high gear. Because if, deep down, you truly believe that becoming rich is a negative outcome.
Like it makes you a bad person or miserable.
Exactly. Or requires you to compromise your values. Well, then your subconscious mind will actively steer you away from that goal. It'll protect you from becoming something you believe is bad.
The analogy used in the source was really vivid for this.
Yeah, the knife to the throat analogy. If someone held a knife to your throat and said, step forward, you wouldn't, right?
Of course not.
Because stepping forward leads to pain, danger. Your subconscious treats wealth the same way if it has these strong negative associations linked to it. It sees wealth as the danger zone.
So you wouldn't consciously, or even unconsciously, work towards something you believe is harmful or bad for you. Wow, that makes total sense.
It really does. And this internal conflict, maybe consciously wanting the money, but subconsciously believing the outcome is negative, that is the root of so much self-sabotage.
The material suggests this is like the single biggest thing this expert works on with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, you can have all the right strategies, the best business plan, work incredibly hard. But if this unconscious programming is running counter to your goals, you're essentially driving with one foot on the gas and one foot firmly on the brake. You're fighting yourself.
And the sources give some really powerful, specific examples of how these beliefs actually play out in real life in people's behavior.
Oh, yeah. One that really stood out was the story about the must go bankrupt belief.
Right. Tell us about that one.
Apparently, one of the experts carried this deep-seated idea, maybe picked up from reading biographies of highly successful people. Donald Trump was mentioned as an example who had gone through bankruptcy at some point.
Okay.
So the belief formed that financial ruin was almost like a necessary rite of passage, that you had to hit that rock bottom to achieve true, lasting success later on.
Wow. What a heavy burden to carry. How could you ever really go all in if you believe that?
Exactly. If you believe the path to massive success requires this incredibly painful failure along the way, how likely are you to truly commit and push yourself? Especially, as the expert noted, if you have a young family you're trying to protect from pain?
You'd hold back.
Absolutely. That belief literally kept him playing small for a long time. He was avoiding the very success he desired because he subconsciously linked it to this prerequisite of painful failure.
That's self-sabotage in its purest form, isn't it? Just protecting yourself from a perceived negative outcome tied to success.
Totally. And another huge one the sources touch on is the guilt and the outright fear of judgment that can come with financial success.
Oh, the guilt is a big one. The anecdote about the person who made their first million at 27, multimillionaire by 28.
Yeah, and yet felt so much guilt or maybe unworthiness that they didn't allow themselves to buy anything genuinely nice until they were 36.
36.
Yeah.
That just speaks volumes about that internal resistance, doesn't it? External achievement doesn't automatically flip an internal switch.
Not at all. You can have the money in the bank, but if you feel unworthy or you're terrified of how others will react, you basically prevent yourself from fully experiencing or enjoying that abundance.
And that fear of how family or friends might react, that's huge for so many people. The worry about, oh, you think you're too cool for us now, or just the general judgment that comes with visible signs of wealth.
The McLaren story from the source is almost funny, but it perfectly illustrates this fear.
The sports car.
Yeah, one expert bought this high-end car, a McLaren, apparently the only one in his entire province at the time, and was so worried about the perception, the judgment, what people would say.
What does he do?
He kept it hidden in his garage for almost 2 weeks. He wouldn't drive it.
Wow. Literally concealing his success because of fear.
Exactly. And the story emphasizes it wasn't just him. Even his wife was hesitant. She didn't want to ride with him to the gym in it because she just didn't want to deal with people's potential reactions. It shows how deeply this fear can affect your daily life and even your relationships.
The Rolex example is another version of this, isn't it? Getting an expensive watch is a gift, but hardly ever wearing it.
Yeah, while there might be practical reasons sometimes, The source suggests a big part of it is often just avoiding attracting judgment or maybe unwanted expectations.
Like that internal question, are people going to treat me differently now? Or are they going to want things from me? Do I even want that kind of attention? It stems directly from those underlying beliefs about what wealth means and how people perceive it.
And this also ties into something called the new floor fear, which is interesting.
What's that?
For successful people, especially entrepreneurs, there can be this hesitation to really call their shot, to fully step into a bigger life or achieve a new level of success, because achieving that new level instantly establishes a new minimum standard. That success becomes the new floor you have to maintain. And the fear of losing it, especially losing it publicly after you've reached that height, that can be a really powerful internal barrier holding people back from striving for more.
That vulnerability of a potential public fall from grace.
Yeah, that's a very real fear. But it's interesting, the sources also explore the sort of paradox around this whole perception thing.
How so?
Well, while the fear of judgment and people treating you differently based on perceived wealth is totally valid, like that anecdote about showing up in the nice car to talk to kids at a rehab center.
Right, and suddenly commanding attention where maybe they wouldn't have before. It shows that perceived wealth does change how some people interact with you, no question.
Right. But the paradox is, if you are comfortable with your wealth, if you own it internally without arrogance or shame.
If you're not hiding it. Exactly. Then that changed perception can sometimes actually, fast-track conversations, as the source puts it. You project a different energy, confidence, capability, and that can open doors.
So it's only if you are uncomfortable with it, if you're projecting that discomfort, that the different perception becomes a source of significant pain and anxiety for you.
That seems to be the idea. And this internal discomfort, this struggle, it explains why, as the source points out, some people who are genuinely ultra-rich find it incredibly difficult to simply say the words, I am ultra-rich.
Even to themselves sometimes, maybe?
Maybe, but certainly outwardly. Why is that so hard for them?
Well, a core reason, according to the material, is this deep-seated fear of being seen as thinking they are better than others.
Oh, okay.
They worry that acknowledging their wealth, even just stating it as a fact, will make them seem arrogant or create distance or fundamentally change how people see them and relate to them. It's almost a fear of isolation that comes with being perceived as different.
It really sounds like managing the internal narrative, the story you tell yourself about your wealth, is just as important, maybe even more important, than managing the actual money itself.
It seems that way. So given all these potential roadblocks, the limiting beliefs, the guilt, the fear, how do people actually break through, the source suggests looking at wealthy people you respect.
Right, people like Gary Vee or Alex and Leah Hermosi were mentioned as examples people might admire. What is it about them? What traits do they embody that seem different?
The key trait that really stands out in the material is that they seem to use their money primarily as a tool for creation and for helping others.
Not just accumulation for its own sake.
Exactly. They reinvest heavily into building businesses, which creates jobs, opportunities, value in the world. They actively inspire and empower entrepreneurship in others, helping them become wealthy. And they use their resources to buy back their most valuable asset, time, so they can live more fully developed, impactful lives beyond just the grind.
The Gary Vee example is pretty powerful in illustrating this. Building his dad's wine business up to, $60 million in revenue.
Yeah, huge success.
But personally owning none of it at that stage and paying himself a relatively modest salary, like $100,000 a year back then. It clearly demonstrates a focus that went way beyond just personal accumulation.
It was about the creation, the growth, the impact, building something bigger than himself.
It totally reframes the purpose of pursuing wealth, doesn't it?
It really does. And this leads directly to challenging that common sentiment you hear people express, oh, I don't need to be rich.
Right. The source confronts this head on.
Yeah.
Why not become rich?
Yeah.
And then use those resources for good.
Yeah, if you genuinely believe that others, maybe the government, maybe corporations, maybe other wealthy individuals won't use money wisely or for the betterment of society,
then step up. Go acquire that wealth yourself, and you decide its purpose. You direct its flow with intention.
it's about taking agency, becoming a conscious steward of resources, rather than just complaining about how others manage theirs. This connects directly to the idea of aspiring to be a creator.
There was that definition of empire mentioned from a book title in the sources.
Yeah, I love that. A life of unlimited creation you never have to retire from.
That's inspiring. Not about ruling or owning in the traditional sense, but about endless, ongoing creation.
And that kind of aspiration, it demands you step into your own power, right? It involves teaching others, especially those starting out, the fundamental lessons, valuing their time, understanding the math of wealth building.
And crucially, the source mentions embracing your own desires without shame, whether that's a supercar, a private jet, a beautiful home.
It's not necessarily about the object itself, but about the freedom to desire it and achieve it without taming that ambition, without letting those limiting beliefs or fears shut it down.
Because ultimately, the source argues, you can't genuinely inspire others to live a bigger, more abundant life if you yourself are consciously playing small out of fear or those hidden limiting beliefs.
You have to embody the possibility.
Exactly. So to bring this whole section back to you, the listener, the powerful idea here is that your personality, your internal world, shapes your personal reality. Your subconscious beliefs directly influence your behaviors day after day, and those behaviors create the environment you live in, the reality you experience financially.
So the question becomes, are your deeply ingrained beliefs, maybe ones you haven't even consciously examined about wealth, about rich people, or even about your own capability and worthiness, are they subtly, or maybe not so subtly, holding you back from the financial reality you truly desire?
It's definitely a question worth sitting with.
Absolutely. And once you start identifying those patterns, the next logical question is, okay, how do you actually go about changing conditioning that might be decades old? Especially when, as we'll get into next, some of that conditioning often comes from the people closest to us, people who had the very best intentions.
Yeah, that brings us perfectly into the insights shared by Jaspit Singh. Because, like you said, identifying the limiting beliefs is one thing, but fundamentally rewiring years, maybe a whole lifetime of conditioning around money. That's a monumental task.
It really is. And it's particularly challenging when, as the source points out, so much of that initial conditioning comes from people like our parents, other family members who genuinely love us and want the best for us.
Right. So that realization that the advice you received may be advice designed to protect you might actually be what's limiting you financially. That can feel incredibly disruptive, almost like your world is blowing up a bit.
Navigating the emotional landscape there is crucial, and it's difficult. It's hard to reconcile the love and good intentions of your parents with this understanding that their own lack of financial education might have led them to teach you beliefs or behaviors that actually hinder your wealth-building journey.
There are complex emotions tied up in that, aren't there? Questioning if you've been operating under false premises, maybe feeling like a fraud if you start doing things differently than what they taught you.
Yeah, and grappling with whether you can still trust their guidance, at least on this specific topic of money.
It's such a sensitive area. How do you navigate that? How do you honor your family while still charting your own course financially, educating yourself to break free from maybe generations of scarcity or insecurity?
Well, a crucial principle highlighted in the sources, and it's pretty direct, is this. If someone doesn't currently have what you want, you probably shouldn't be taking their advice on how to get it.
That's blunt, but probably true in many cases.
Your parents or family, while having your absolute best interests at heart and providing immense value in countless other areas of life, they may simply lack the specific knowledge, the experience, or even the mindset required to guide you toward building significant financial wealth.
It's like that common analogy, right? You wouldn't take fitness advice from someone who's significantly unhealthy or business advice from someone whose own business consistently fails.
Precisely. And the sources offer a specific, really relatable example of this dynamic, especially in the context of immigrant families, like the traditional Indian immigrant families mentioned in the material.
Okay.
Parents arrive in a new country, often with very little. They work incredibly hard, make immense sacrifices, all driven by this powerful desire for their children to have a better life than they did.
Understandable.
Totally. But lacking their own formal financial education on actual wealth building, their guidance often channels children towards professions that are perceived to guarantee status and, crucially, a high income, like becoming a doctor, because that's their framework for what better looks like.
The expert shares his own personal story about this, right? The intense, decades-long pressure from his parents, starting when he was really young, pushing him relentlessly toward becoming a doctor. And they explicitly linked it to status, finding a good spouse, and achieving wealth.
And this perfectly illustrates a critical disconnect that this section of the sources really hammers home: the fundamental difference between simply making money and actively building wealth.
Okay, unpack that distinction.
You can follow that traditional path, get the good grades, go to the best schools, enter a high-income profession like being a doctor in Beverly Hills, maybe earning $300,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year.
Sounds pretty wealthy to most people.
It sounds it, but you can do all that and still not actually build wealth.
How is that possible? That's so counterintuitive to what we're generally taught. High income equals wealthy, right?
That's the assumption, but the reality, as the sources starkly point out, is that many, many high-income earners are financially broke. Or at best, they're living paycheck to paycheck, just at a much higher level. They have substantial cash flow coming in, absolutely. But they often lacked significant savings, they lack investments, and most critically, they lack the financial education on what to actually do with their money beyond just spending it.
The material mentions encountering numerous doctors earning massive salaries who have literally zero savings or investments.
Zero. It's shocking but true. People can easily make millions and millions of dollars over their career and literally die with nothing substantial accumulated.
Yeah.
Nothing to pass on, nothing for their own later years.
And why does this happen? How can you earn so much and end up with nothing?
Because they get caught, like most of society, in the consumer mentality trap.
Explain that.
When people start making more money, the default programming, the societal conditioning, kicks in immediately. Great, what can I buy now?
Not, what can I invest now?
Rarely. The first thought isn't typically about investing or saving for the long term. It's about upgrading the lifestyle. The trip to Cancun becomes the trip to Europe. The Toyota becomes a BMW. The small house becomes the mansion. The latest gadgets, designer clothes. We are absolutely conditioned by society, by advertising, by everything around us to be consumers.
It's like that comparison in the source, the American tendency to make $1 just to spend $2,
Yeah.
often using debt.
Right. Versus maybe a more traditional Indian mindset mentioned, though both can be taken to unproductive extremes, of making $1 to spend only 20 cents with a heavy focus on saving.
And this consumer trap is incredibly effective, isn't it? The more you make.
The more you feel justified or even compelled to spend, lifestyle inflation is real. And it is surprisingly easy to spend $1 million a year if you have the income to support it.
$1 million a year.
Think about it. Mortgage payments on a luxury home, maybe a second home, high-end car leases or payments, expensive family vacations, private school tuition, designer wardrobes, frequent fine dining, country club memberships. It adds up incredibly fast.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
And if you spend it all, or even most of it, there's simply nothing left over for building actual lasting wealth. The engine is running fast, but the fuel tank for the future is always empty.
So what's the alternative? What's the fundamental formula then, if high income isn't the answer? The source simplifies it into 5 essential steps for actually becoming wealthy.
It seems almost too basic when you lay it out, but this really is the root principle. Forget the complex schemes for a second. This is the foundation.
Okay, what are the steps?
1, you must earn money, obviously.
Yeah.
That's the starting point. Job, business, side hustle, whatever brings cash in the door.
Got it.
2, you must not spend all of your money. This sounds blindingly obvious, but honestly, this is where most people fail, regardless of income level. You have to consistently spend less than you earn.
And that includes not using credit cards or loans to spend money you don't actually have yet.
Critically important. Avoid that debt trap that just digs the hole deeper. Okay, step 3. You take the money, you don't spend the surplus, and you use it to buy an investment.
This is the crucial middleman mentioned in the source.
Exactly. Something that, over time, has the potential to generate more money for you. Think stocks, bonds, real estate, maybe a business you invest in. Something that works for you.
Okay, earn, save, invest. What's next?
4. When your investments generate income, like dividends or rent, or they grow in value, you reinvest those earnings back into your investment.
Oh, the magic of compounding.
That's where the real growth engine kicks in over the long term. And finally, step 5. You actively work to earn more money, but not just to spend more.
But specifically with the intention of having more capital to put into your investments, accelerating the whole process.
Earn, save, invest, reinvest, earn more to invest more. That's the fundamental cycle of wealth building.
It does sound simple when you break it down like that, almost deceptively simple.
In theory, yes, but it's so difficult in practice because, as the sources correctly point out, the entire economic system, our whole society, is largely engineered to encourage you to do the opposite, to spend your money.
And in doing so, make other people rich.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every time you buy that extra guacamole at Chipotle, they get richer. Every time you click Buy Now on Amazon without thinking, they get richer. Every time you upgrade your phone unnecessarily, Apple gets richer. The system thrives on your consumption.
So the shift required to build personal wealth is fundamentally about consciously deciding to redirect some of that outward flow of cash.
Back towards yourself and your own future financial security, rather than letting it all just flow out to enrich corporations and other people.
You have to prioritize making yourself rich first through saving and investing before you spend the rest on making everyone else rich.
Precisely. By keeping and investing a predetermined portion of what you earn as a non-negotiable priority before you allocate the rest for spending.
And the sources emphasize you don't need to live like a monk to do this, right? It's not about extreme deprivation.
No, not at all. You don't have to adopt a miserable shoebox and rice and beans lifestyle forever. You can absolutely find a balance. Enjoy your life. Spend money on things you value.
But the key is the order and the intention. Decide on an amount or percentage to save and invest first, automate it if possible, make it non-negotiable.
And then figure out how to live enjoyably on the rest. Not the other way around, which is how most people operate: spend first, and then see if anything is left over to save, which is usually nothing.
It's a conscious act of prioritizing your future security and growth over immediate, often fleeting gratification.
Which requires overcoming that deep psychological barrier, that conditioning to consume. The expert shares his own journey here, right?
Yeah, he mentioned starting out earning money and immediately spending it on things that felt like status symbols, nice watches, tricking out cars.
Because that felt like the normal thing to do with extra money. It's what he saw others doing, what society seemed to value.
But then financial education revealed that while it looked like he was successful because he had nice things, he wasn't actually building any real lasting wealth.
Right. So then he swung to the opposite extreme for a while, becoming overly frugal, not spending anything.
Before eventually finding a healthier, more sustainable, balanced approach.
Which is key. And that psychological barrier around spending on, say, experiences versus investments, it's powerful. It's genuinely hard for many people to put money aside into something like a stock portfolio.
Because you can't show it off, right? You can't post your S&P 500 index fund on Instagram for likes and validation like you can a new $10,000 watch or photos from a luxury vacation.
Exactly. An investment portfolio is quiet. It's invisible work happening slowly in the background.
Yeah.
It doesn't feed that immediate need for external validation or attention that visible consumption does.
But the source offers a really sobering perspective on the long game here.
Yeah, this part was eye-opening. Even if you have a relatively modest income, let's say $50,000 a year, over the course of a typical working lifetime, say 40 years,
You'll earn millions.
you will likely earn millions of dollars. In that example, $2 million. Even without a single raise or promotion, millions will flow through your hands.
Okay.
The critical question and the stark reality highlighted is, at the end of that career, after millions have passed through your account, what will you actually have to show for it? Statistically, for most people, the answer is close to nothing.
Wow. That is incredibly powerful and honestly a little bit scary when you think about it like that. All that money earned through years of effort.
And the default outcome for most is to end up with virtually zero accumulated wealth, maybe some equity in a house if they're lucky, but often significant debt too.
It forces you to ask a fundamental question, doesn't it?
It really does. Why are you earning money in the first place? Are you doing it primarily to look rich in the eyes of others, to keep up appearances, to fund a certain lifestyle now? Or are you earning and managing it intentionally to actually build wealth, to create real security, opportunity, freedom, and a better future for yourself, for your family, maybe for causes you care about?
That choice, the source suggests, is entirely yours to make. It's a conscious decision.
And it's a choice that requires confronting that deep-seated conditioning we talked about and making deliberate decisions that might not be the norm, that might not get you immediate applause in a consumer-driven society.
It's about prioritizing something less visible now, but potentially far more impactful and freeing in the long run.
Absolutely. Which actually leads us quite nicely into a completely different, more energetic perspective on money, shared with the insights of Ken Honda.
Yeah, this is where the conversation shifts gear a bit, doesn't it? It becomes perhaps a bit more intuitive, maybe even philosophical.
Definitely. The core idea presented here is that money isn't just a static number on a screen or a physical object in your wallet. It's actually a form of energy.
Okay, money is energy.
And crucially, like any energy, it needs to flow. It needs to circulate.
And from this perspective, what happens if you try to stop that flow? If you hoard money too tightly?
Well, the idea is that preventing that natural flow by hoarding money out of fear or scarcity can actually lead to negative outcomes, almost as if the stagnant energy creates problems elsewhere to force itself out.
The sources give some examples that might sound a bit unusual at first, maybe a bit woo-woo to some.
Perhaps. Things like if you hold on to money too tightly, refusing to let it flow, you might unexpectedly face situations that force you to spend it. Like suddenly getting sick and needing to pay significant medical bills.
Or your kids accidentally causing some kind of expensive damage you have to pay for.
Right. The underlying idea isn't necessarily mystical causation, but more that money needs circulation to remain healthy, just like water in a pond. It needs an outlet.
The analogies used are quite vivid, aren't they? Comparing hoarded money to a pond without an outlet, where the water becomes stagnant, murky, unhealthy.
Or like eating constantly without ever being able to release the waste. Eventually you get sick, you get blocked up, and financially you might explode when a large, unavoidable expense finally hits and you haven't allowed for any outflow.
So to stay financially healthy from this perspective, and importantly, to create space for new money to come in, you have to be willing to let money flow out.
That's the concept. It directly challenges that extreme save every single penny at all costs mindset we just discussed. It's not just about accumulation, it's about conscious, healthy movement and circulation.
So what's the biggest barrier then to allowing money to flow more freely?
According to this perspective, it's a fundamental lack of trust.
Trust in what?
Specifically, a lack of trust that when you let money go, whether through spending, investing, or giving it, will naturally find its way back to you, perhaps even multiplied. This deep-seated, scarcity-based lack of trust is what breeds that constant worry, that doubt, that impulse to cling tightly.
Okay, so if lack of trust is the block, how do you cultivate that trust? How do you develop that belief that money will return if you let it go? The source suggests a specific practice, doesn't it? Almost like a mantra or an affirmation.
Yeah, it's designed to counteract that instinctive impulse to cling tightly out of fear, instead of holding on desperately.
You practice gratitude and intentional release.
Exactly. The suggested mantra is actually quite beautiful. When you spend money, you mentally, or even quietly aloud, say to it, "Thank you for staying with me. Now just go bless the world and come back with your friends as soon as possible. Come back."
Come back with your friends. I like that.
Me too. The imagery is powerful. If you release it easily and quickly, with gratitude and blessing, it returns easily and quickly, often bringing more abundance friends with it. It completely transforms the act of spending or giving from a fearful loss into a grateful circulation with an embedded expectation of return.
That really reframes the whole energy around releasing money, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Shifting from scarcity and fear to abundance and trust.
And this concept of flow and balance ties into a fascinating point the source makes about relationships, framed almost as a Zen concept.
Which is?
That spenders and savers frequently find themselves attracted to each other. They pair up.
Oh, that dynamic is incredibly common. We see it all the time.
But it can obviously create significant conflict, right? Because their core relationship with money's flow is often completely opposite. One wants to hold, the other wants to release.
And the source touches on potential reasons behind that. Sometimes excessive spending by one partner might actually be a way to cope with stress.
Especially if the other partner is the primary earner, maybe working constantly, leaving no time or space for enjoyment or release themselves. The spender becomes the outlet for that pent-up energy.
Understanding the why behind the behavior is definitely key. But for individuals who are on the extreme saving end of the spectrum, those with significant attachment issues around money, the prescription offered in the source is quite direct, isn't it?
Very direct. They need to consciously practice spending, actively letting go.
And there's that specific, maybe even provocative experiment mentioned for these types of savers.
Yeah, the spend $1,000 for nothing experiment.
Tell us about that.
The instruction is literally, go to the bank, withdraw $1,000 in cash. Then you have 24 hours to deliberately spend it all on things you don't actually need. Spend it for nothing. Essentially just to experience the act of letting go without justification.
Wow. How do people react to that?
Their reaction to just the instruction and then the immense difficulty these individuals often have actually completing the task powerfully reveals the depth of their attachment to money.
So source mentions a client who, given this specific task, to spend $1,000.
Came back having only managed to spend $20.
$20 out of $1,000. That just demonstrates how deeply ingrained that conditioning against wasting money is. It literally goes against their fundamental emotional, and maybe even, as the source suggests, their physical constitution.
Right. So if the very idea of wasting money feels inherently wrong, almost immoral to an extreme saver, how can they start to reframe spending? How can they practice this prescribed letting go?
The source suggests, first, letting go of the need for every single expense to be justified as a logical, measurable investment. Sometimes you just enjoy the flow.
Yeah, like giving money away without expecting anything back, or even metaphorical throwing it away as an exercise just to break that psychological attachment. It allows others to benefit, keeps the energy circulating, and loosens that internal grip.
It directly challenges that powerful childhood lesson most of us got. Take care of your money, don't waste it.
Exactly. What if, just as a thought experiment, you found a $100 bill on the street? The typical saver instinct is great, put it in the bank. But what if your exercise was to simply leave it there for someone else? Or give it immediately to the next person you see?
The intense discomfort that idea probably elicits in many people really highlights how strong that programming around holding on tightly actually is.
And the outcome of these kinds of spending experiments, according to the source, is often a profound realization for clients about the intensity of their attachment to money, an attachment that was often largely unconscious until it was challenged in this direct way.
And the source mentions that interesting, almost metaphorical physical correlation too.
Yeah, that savers people identified as having significant attachment issues around money tend to also experience physical issues like constipation.
Wow. It's framed as a parallel difficulty in letting go.
Right.
Difficulty letting go of money. Difficulty letting go of physical waste.
It's a powerful parallel. Difficulty with financial flow mirroring difficulty with physical flow.
The core message here seems to be that the natural flow of energy, including financial energy, gets inhibited, blocked up by attachment and by scarcity thinking.
And conversely, if you can cultivate the ability to let go easily with trust, more opportunities and resources tend to flow towards you more easily. If you cling too tightly, you essentially create a blockage that prevents new things, new money, new opportunities from entering your life.
This really resonated with that anecdote in the material about the friend back in their 20s.
Oh yeah, the one who is so resistant to spending even small amounts like $50 or $100 to go out and socialize.
Right. And as a result, they consistently missed out on numerous opportunities to meet people, to network, to build relationships, to create new connections that could have benefited them immensely down the line.
Contrast that with the expert's own story from his youth. Spending $200 on a seminar, a sum that felt absolutely enormous, like $1 million to him at the time.
Right.
But because he was willing to spend it, he ended up being the only young person there. And that opened doors to invaluable connections, mentorship, opportunities that were truly priceless in the long run. It proved to be a great investment, but not in the traditional financial sense. It was an investment in connection and experience.
It wasn't just spending money. It was spending money on an experience that facilitated growth and opportunity. This ties into another beautiful reframing mentioned, shopping for memories.
Yes. Choosing to spend money, not just on stuff, but on experiences, travel, learning new things, meeting people, enjoying life with loved ones creates lasting memory.
And unlike material possessions, which can break, get old, or lose their appeal,
those memories stay with you for a lifetime. They become part of who you are. And ultimately, the source suggests those are the things you'll reflect on and cherish most when you're older. They represent a different kind of wealth, one that isn't measured purely in dollars and cents.
this whole idea of trusting the flow, letting go of scarcity thinking, it also connects to listening to your inner guidance, right?
Yep.
Listening to your heart.
Absolutely. The source suggests that constant anxiety and scarcity thinking around money can effectively trap your heart. It clouds your intuition, makes it difficult to hear your inner wisdom or discern what truly aligns with your soul's purpose.
So calming that financial anxiety, that constant worry, is actually a necessary first step.
It seems so.
Yeah.
It creates the space needed to allow your heart, your intuition, to guide you towards decisions that feel genuinely right, that align with your true purpose, your unique reserved seat in life, as the source puts it. And that alignment is where genuine excitement, passion, and a natural magnetism for abundance come from.
Okay, but how do you actually start listening to that guidance amidst all the noise and stress of daily life? The source suggests a simple daily practice.
Yeah, nothing complicated, just a few minutes of quiet reflection each day. Maybe when you're waiting in line, waiting for an Uber, just taking a pause, and consciously ask your heart, am I genuinely excited about this path, about this project, about this commitment?
And then just listen for the feeling.
Listen for that genuine feeling of expansion or contraction, excitement or dread. If something you're considering, or even something you're already committed to, doesn't spark that genuine excitement deep down, it might be a sign that it's not truly aligned with your purpose or your highest path right now.
Okay, but what's the guidance if your heart isn't excited about something you've already committed to? You can't just drop everything.
No, the advice is practical and kind. If you've already said yes often because you wanted to be a good person or felt obligated, then fulfill that commitment with integrity. Be a person of your word. But learn from that experience. Use it as feedback. And be much more discerning, much more careful about saying yes to things in the future that don't genuinely light you up or feel aligned.
Protect your energy.
Exactly. The expert even mentions using systems or having a team, like checking with his secretary, to help filter requests and protect his time and energy for the things that truly excite him and align with his mission.
This idea of daily practice and intentionality, it extends to our internal dialogue too, doesn't it? What we say to ourselves, even if you're skeptical about formal affirmations.
Right. The source makes a powerful point. You are already constantly affirming things to yourself subconsciously all day long. And for many people, those default affirmations are overwhelmingly negative.
Like what?
This day is going to be terrible. I'm not good enough. I'll never figure this out. Money is always hard to come by. Nothing ever works out for me. We run these tapes constantly without realizing it.
Writing down your persistent thoughts, as suggested, can be really revealing, can't it? Exposing that subconscious chatter.
Incredibly revealing. And once you see it, once you become aware of that negative internal soundtrack, you suddenly have a powerful choice.
Do you continue to feed those negative limiting thoughts?
Or do you consciously choose to feed positive, loving, empowering thoughts about yourself, your capabilities, and your reality instead?
And choosing that positive, empowering self-talk, even if it feels unnatural at first, actively starts to shape your reality.
That's the core idea. As the source puts it very simply, it's what you get. Your internal narrative, the story you tell yourself day in and day out, literally creates your external experience over time.
So connecting this powerful concept back to you, the listener, your daily self-talk is fundamentally constructing your reality, especially around money. Are you unconsciously telling yourself a story about money that's rooted in limitation, fear, and scarcity? A story that ends up harming you and actually repelling the abundance you seek?
Or can you consciously begin to shift that narrative? Can you start telling yourself a different story, one grounded in gratitude for what you have, trust in the flow, and the expectation of positive outcomes and returning abundance? Constant stress and worry about money is a powerful, repelling energy. Learning to cultivate trust and release that scarcity thinking creates the energetic space for abundance to actually enter your life.
This potent idea of the story you tell yourself and how it shapes everything provides a perfect bridge to our final set of insights, these ones from Rob Dial.
Absolutely. Building directly on those concepts that our beliefs shape reality, that money operates like energy, this final expert's contribution really emphasizes the direct causal link between the specific language we use, the narrative or story we're constantly telling ourselves, and the reality we ultimately experience.
Okay, so if language is that powerful, how can someone who is currently struggling financially, maybe feeling broke or stuck, start to proactively create a different story, an internal script that can actually start attracting more money or abundance?
The key, according to the source, is to craft a narrative that isn't based on, wishful thinking or just denying your current reality. That doesn't work.
Right. You can't just pretend you're a millionaire if your bank account is empty.
Exactly. The narrative needs to be, first, true to your current state and commitment. Second, it needs to be empowering in its focus. And third, crucially, it needs to be framed in the present tense to solidify a deep commitment to action.
So it's not about pretending you are rich right now if you're not. It's about declaring your present intention and your commitment to the process.
Precisely. The specific affirmation structure suggested is powerful because it's grounded in the reality of today, but points clearly towards the desired future outcome through action.
Give us an example.
Something like, today I am committed to taking the actions necessary to make more money in my bank account in the future. See? Present tense commitment. I am committed. Focused on action, taking the actions necessary, leading to the future result, more money.
Or applying it to other areas like the source mentioned.
Right.
Today, I am committed to listening intently to my children so they feel like I love them.
Same structure. Present commitment, present action, future feeling outcome.
Hmm.
The power is in the word committed and the unwavering focus on taking the actions necessary today.
It shifts the focus entirely, doesn't it? From passively hoping or wishing for money to just appear.
To actively engaging, right now, in the process, the actions that will inevitably lead to that desired outcome down the road. Money, like so many results in life, is often what the source calls a lagging indicator. Meaning it's the result that shows up after the work has been done. It's the consequence of actions, decisions, and mindsets that you implemented consistently in the past. So you commit wholeheartedly to the necessary actions today, trusting that the financial results will follow later as a natural consequence of that committed action.
This connects directly to the whole issue of procrastination, doesn't it? Which the source really digs into. Procrastination isn't usually the root problem itself.
No, the sources are clear on this. Procrastination is almost always just a symptom. It's the outward sign, the behavior we see, but it's driven by deeper underlying causes.
And the material identifies two main culprits behind most procrastination. What are they?
The first one is often rooted in identity. You simply don't believe deep down inside that you are the kind of person who is capable of achieving that goal.
So the internal narrative is something like, I'm just not the kind of person who can build wealth, or I'm not smart enough, or I always fail at this stuff.
Exactly. I don't think I can actually do it. So if you don't believe you can succeed, why would you even bother starting? Procrastination becomes a form of self-protection from predicted failure.
Okay, so identity is one cause. What's the second?
The second major cause is fear. Specifically, fear associated with the future outcome itself.
Fear of what, exactly?
It could be fear of failure, obviously, fear of looking stupid or being judged by others if you try and don't succeed. But paradoxically, it can also be fear of success.
Fear of success. How does that work?
Remember the new floor fear we talked about? Fear of the increased pressure, the higher expectations. Fear of potentially losing relationships if you change, fear of the unknown responsibilities that might come with success. All those fears can make you unconsciously sabotage your efforts or just avoid starting altogether.
Wow. So identity limitations and various fears are the real drivers behind procrastination. How do you overcome those powerful internal blocks then?
The source offers a really dramatic thought experiment to illustrate the answer. You need a strong enough why.
Explain that.
Okay, imagine someone asks you, realistically, what percentage chance do you think there is that you could make $1 million net in the next 12 months? What would most people say?
Probably close to zero. Maybe 1% or 2% if they're feeling wildly optimistic.
Right. Now imagine the scenario changes slightly. What's the percentage chance you could make $1 million in the next 12 months if and only if you succeed? Everyone you love deeply is saved from certain death. If you fail, they die.
Oh, wow, okay.
What's the percentage chance now?
100%, no question. You'd figure it out or die trying.
Exactly. Everyone says 100%. Instantly.
Yeah.
What changed? The goal didn't change. Make $1. The time frame didn't change, 12 months. The only thing that changed was the reason for doing it. The why.
The why became overwhelmingly powerful, saving loved ones.
And that incredibly compelling why instantly obliterated the fear of failure, the worry about identity, can I do this, any thoughts about judgment, any impulse whatsoever to procrastinate. You wouldn't hesitate for a second. You would just figure out what needed to be done and pour every ounce of your being into doing it.
So a powerful enough why, a compelling enough reason, is the fuel that overrides all that internal resistance, the fears, the limiting identity beliefs.
That's the idea, and the source adds an important nuance here. Ideally, your why for pursuing wealth or any big goal should be larger than just satisfying your own personal ego.
What do you mean?
If your primary motivation for making money is purely for personal status, just buying stuff for yourself, or feeding your ego, the sources suggest you might hit limitations. It's like you'll hit a dam in the flow of abundance because that energy is very inwardly focused, almost constricted.
But if your why involves using those resources to serve others in some way, to empower others, to create value for others, which of course still includes taking care of yourself and your family within that,
then that purpose, that outward flowing intention, opens up the channel much wider. The source describes it like the difference between a small creek and the wide, powerful Mississippi River. Abundance flows much more freely and powerfully when the intention driving it is expansive, creative, and includes contribution beyond just yourself.
It's not that you can't acquire money purely for ego-driven reasons.
No, you certainly can. But the sources sadly note that path often doesn't lead to genuine happiness or fulfillment. There are countless examples, unfortunately, of individuals who achieved immense external success driven purely by ego, but were profoundly unhappy, lonely, or even met tragic ends. It highlights that wealth without a deeper purpose often feels empty.
True fulfillment seems to come more from the journey, the creation, the contribution, the positive impact, not just the accumulation itself.
Exactly. And this concept of being driven by a purpose greater than just personal gain ties beautifully into another really powerful analogy from the source, the steward analogy.
The one about the universe and the toys. Tell us that one.
Imagine the universe, or God, or whatever higher power you resonate with, possessing vast resources like a collection of amazing toys, which represent money, opportunities, abundance. And this entity is looking around trying to decide who would be a good steward, who would be trustworthy enough to entrust these resources to.
Okay, so who are the potential recipients?
Well, you have two main types, represented as Child A and Child B.
What's Child A like?
Child A receives a toy or money and immediately complains. It's not enough. My friend got a bigger one. It's not the right color. I wanted blue. This is red. They focus instantly on lack, on what's wrong with it. They bring all this negative, ungrateful energy to it. They might hoard it selfishly, not share it, maybe handle it carelessly and break it, or waste it on trivial, stupid stuff without any thought or care.
That sounds uncomfortably familiar. Like how many people react, maybe unconsciously, when they receive their paycheck. Focusing immediately on how it's not enough, complaining about bills, bringing all this negative energy to the money they do have.
Yeah, the expert even admits very honestly that this was his pattern for years, constantly complaining about money, feeling like it was never enough, while simultaneously being overdrawn and not managing what he did have very well at all. He was being Child A.
Okay, so what about Child B? How are they different?
Child B receives the same toy or the same amount of money, but reacts completely differently. Their first response is gratitude. Wow, thank you. They are genuinely thankful for whatever amount they receive. They handle it with care. They play with it nicely. Maybe they try to learn how it works. They're happy to share it generously with others. They're smart and responsible with it.
Okay, so if you are the one handing out the toys, the resources, who would you be more inclined to give more to in the future?
It's obvious, isn't it? Child B every time. The one who demonstrated they were a good, grateful, responsible steward of what they were initially given. You'd trust them with more. You wouldn't give more to Child A who just complained and wasted it.
So applying this directly to money.
The source emphasizes the absolutely transformative power of consciously shifting from being Child A in your relationship with money, ungrateful, complaining, focused on lack, hoarding, wasting, to becoming Child B. Which means practicing genuine gratitude for every amount you receive, no matter how small. Like finding a penny on the street, don't just ignore it. Pick it up, be thankful. If I can't be trusted with a little, the saying goes, I can't be trusted with a lot. Learn financial wisdom. Become smarter with managing your resources. Be generous and share whenever possible. Basically, strive to be the best, most responsible, most appreciative steward you can possibly be of the money you currently have.
And this shift in behavior and mindset from complaining and scarcity to gratitude and responsible stewardship, that is what the expert claims fundamentally widened the river of abundance for him personally.
Yes, because by demonstrating consistently that he could be trusted to manage and appreciate whatever he had, regardless of the amount, it was like there was suddenly more space created energetically for the universe, or life, to entrust him with more resources. He proved he was ready to be Child B.
So the story you tell yourself, the language you use daily, it's fundamental. It dictates your reality not just by shaping your internal beliefs, but by directly influencing whether you show up as Child A or Child B in your actual day-to-day relationship with money.
And that relationship, that way of being, is reinforced by your daily commitment to action. Speaking in a way that affirms your commitment to building wealth and taking action today, it isn't just wishful thinking. It's a powerful declaration that aligns your energy and naturally leads you, almost compels you, to start taking the small, consistent steps towards that desired reality.
Which brings us right back to the practical, doesn't it? The day-to-day.
Exactly. What is one specific, maybe even small action that you can identify right now, today, that you know you could improve upon to support your growth?
Yeah.
Whether it's specifically around money or maybe your health, your relationships, anything that truly matters to you.
It doesn't have to be huge, does it?
Not at all. It could be making that difficult phone call you've been avoiding. It could be sticking to the schedule you set for yourself this morning. It could be consciously choosing a healthy meal instead of junk food. It could be moving your body for 15 minutes.
Or, crucially, as the source points out, if your heart and body are screaming that you're burnt out. Maybe the most important action today is allowing yourself the necessary rest and recovery, without guilt, listening to your actual needs.
Whatever that one small positive action is for you today, consciously identifying it and then doing it reinforces your commitment to yourself, builds integrity, and creates the momentum for tomorrow and the day after.
It's really about integrating all these different levels we've talked about, isn't it? Your underlying beliefs, your financial education and understanding, your relationship with energy and flow, the internal narrative you're running, and finally, your concrete daily actions, getting them all aligned and moving in the same direction.
That's it. Creating a cohesive way of being in the world that naturally aligns with the reality you truly wish to create for yourself.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, wow, we've really journeyed through some incredibly impactful and sometimes quite different perspectives on money mindsets from these sources.
We really have. We started by exploring Dan Martell's insights, didn't we? Looking at how our unconscious beliefs about ourselves and about wealth itself can create these powerful internal barriers, how they lead to subtle yet really destructive self-sabotage that's often fueled by fears, fear of judgment, fear of failure, even fear of the perceived negative outcomes of being rich.
Then we move to Jaspit Singh's really crucial distinction between just societal or familial conditioning around money versus true financial education, highlighting how well-intentioned advice can sometimes be limiting and clarifying those essential, though simple steps required to shift from merely earning money to actively building wealth. That means consciously prioritizing saving and investing over just consuming, especially in a system that's constantly encouraging us to do the opposite.
Then Ken Honda offered that fascinating, more energetic perspective, viewing money as a form of energy that needs to flow, that requires trust and a willingness to release, challenging that scarcity-driven impulse to hoard and suggesting practices like the gratitude mantra or reframings like shopping for memories to help overcome attachment and allow abundance to circulate more freely in our lives.
And finally, Rob Dial brought so many of these threads together by emphasizing the profound power of the narrative, the story we tell ourselves daily, urging us to consciously create an empowering story that's grounded in present commitment to action. Understanding procrastination not as the problem, but as a symptom of deeper identity issues and fears. Stressing the immense power of having a why that serves something greater than just our own ego, and highlighting that transformative potential of becoming a truly grateful and responsible steward like Child B of whatever money we currently have, no matter the amount.
Yeah, the unifying message that seems to emerge across all these diverse viewpoints is really clear, and it's powerful. Your internal landscape, your beliefs, your level of financial understanding, your emotional relationship with money's flow, and the story you consistently narrate for yourself day after day, this internal world is not just some passive backdrop to your financial life. It is absolutely fundamental in shaping the financial reality you experience.
So we truly encourage you, our listener, to spend some time reflecting on these insights. Think about your own relationship with money. What beliefs, maybe hidden ones you haven't examined before, might be influencing your decisions, or maybe your lack of decisions.
Are you perhaps caught in that common cycle of earning primarily to consume, or are you consciously, actively engaging in the practice of building long-term wealth?
Are you tending to cling tightly to money out of fear and scarcity? Or are you learning to cultivate trust in its natural flow, allowing it to circulate?
And maybe most importantly, what is the dominant narrative, the main story you are telling yourself right now about your own financial potential, about your worthiness, and about your capacity to create abundance in your life?
And perhaps the most practical and provocative question to carry forward from this whole deep dive is this. Based on everything we've explored today, what is just one specific, maybe even small action that you are genuinely committed to taking today, starting right now, to consciously align your beliefs, your behaviors, and your internal story more closely with building the kind of financial reality and the kind of inner peace around money that you truly desire?
That one action could be the start of a whole new chapter.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the psychology and energy of money. We really hope these powerful insights provide you with some valuable clarity and maybe some concrete, actionable steps you can take on your own journey towards greater abundance and peace.